Good morning. It is exciting that we are on now, going on to Daf Kuf Bet. So day 101, so to speak, of Masechet Yevamot. And so we are at the very bottom of Daf Kuf Aleph Amud Bet, just the last two words. And we have been near the end of the day yesterday, we talked about Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda, who was a ger, he was a convert, and he noted that he was not able to sit on the court that observed the chalitza because of that fact. And so as we pick up with the last two words on Daf Kuf Aleph Amud Bet, so we're going to discuss how Jewish the judges observing chalitza need to be. And we're going to see that, in fact, in this instance, we're going to require both of the parents be Jewish. So Amar Rava, in the bottom of Kuf Aleph Amud Bet, Amar Rava, as we turn to Kuf Bet Amud Aleph, Ger dan et chaveiro dvar Torah, that a convert is able to judge chaveiro, here referring to a fellow convert, meaning another person who's also a convert, Dvar Torah, according to biblical law. So according to biblical law, and we'll see that there's a machlokas between Rashi and Tosfos here about exactly what kind of biblical law we're talking about. But according to biblical law, they one convert can judge another, but Shenamar, Som Tasim Alecha Melech Asher Yivchar Hashem Elokecha Bo. Mikerav Achecha Tasim Alecha Melech. That the idea is that you need to put over yourself a king, Mikerev Amecha, from Mikerev Achecha. So Alecha hu debein and Mikerev Achecha. That in order to put somebody over yourself, that person needs to be from the midst of your brothers. So that means that if you're a Jew from birth, so then a Jew from birth can be the person who judged you. But if you're a convert, then but a convert could not. On the other hand, a convert could judge another convert. Aval ger dan et chaveiro ger. So although this pasuk tells us that if you're born Jewish, you need only somebody else who's born Jewish, meaning that because they have to be Mikerev Achecha, and presumably somebody who converts is not Mikerev Achecha because they were not born Jewish. So as a result, that is not covered. So, but who can a ger judge? A ger can judge at chaveiro ger. A convert can judge. One convert can judge another convert. However, if the mother of the person is Jewish, well, then the person is a full-fledged Jew, or relatively a full-fledged Jew. So then Dan Afil Yisrael, he can judge even a fully Jew, meaning a Jew who is born from a father and mother who are Jewish. So Ulinyan Chalitza, but when it comes to Chalitza, Rava continues, Ad Sheyehi Aviv Imo Yisrael, unless the father and the mother are Jewish, then you're not able to do it. Shenamar v'nikra shmo b'Yisrael, that you need to be, that the person his name should be called out in Israel, meaning among the people of Israel. That means that the people who are watching, specifically the people who are required to watch, namely the court, they need to be full-fledged Jews. And the point is that the additional teaching of in Israel in this context tells us not only that the mother must be Jewish, but even the father must be Jewish. Now, what kind of law are we talking about here? So here's a machlokas between Rashi and Tosfos. We take a look at the top Rashi. We see dine nefashos, that when we say that a judge, that a convert can not judge a regular Jew, but can only judge other converts. So that is talking about dine nefashos, when a capital case. Because Rashi continues that if this is talking about the laws, monetary laws, well, afilu kol Yisrael, even a convert's able to judge anyone, even a regular Yisrael. Ditnan, because we learn in Sanhedrin, hakol ksherim ladun dine mamonos. Everybody is kosher to judge matters of monetary matters. And we excuse me, lasuye ger, excuse me, that when it comes to who is included in this concept of everyone is kosher to judge monetary matters, we say that that refers to a ger. So that's Rashi, and Rashi is consistent throughout Shas apparently that on this point, that when we say ger danes chaveiro but not a Yisrael, it's talking about dinei nefashos. On the other hand, Tosos disagrees. If you take a look at the first full Tosos on Kuf Bet Amud Aleph, we say appears b'kudros hainu ladinei nefashos, right? So Tosos says that quotes Rashi, but ve'ein nira kedekasati b'achol. It says as written earlier in this Masechet. And what does he write there? There he writes the fact that that this is actually modifying the language in Sanhedrin. So Sanhedrin says that a ger can serve as a judge, but it doesn't say who the ger is judging. And here we are telling us that it's talking about monetary matters. And why does it make a lot of sense to follow Tosafos' understanding? Because otherwise it's a little bit odd that according to Rashi, a ger can judge another ger who is another ger about capital cases, but when it comes to chalitza, then a ger can't watch anybody, and that seems a little bit odd. It seems a little bit odd that a chalitza case would be stricter than a capital case. On the other hand, according to Tosos, when we're talking about just a monetary case, when we say that a convert can judge a convert but not a regular Jew, then it makes a lot more sense, because then it is natural for chalitza, to be, more strict, and it require a greater degree of Jew than a monetary case. So that is Rava's statement. And that brings us, and now we're ready to continue. So the next piece is going to be a quote about a debate about what Rav Kahana said in the name of Rav regarding performing chalitza with a minal. So again, a minal is a soft leather shoe. And so what's the halacha? So Amar Rabba, Amar Rav Kahana, Amar Rav. So Rabba says that in the name of Rav Kahana, in the name of Rav, that im yavo Eliyahu v'yomer choltzin b'minal. If Eliyahu were to come and say, you know what, you are allowed to do chalitza with a minal, shomin lo, we would listen to him. Ein choltzin b'sandal. But if he were to come and tell us that you can't use a sandal, a regular shoe, ein shomin lo, we would not listen to him. Shekvar nahagu ha'am b'sandal, because we already everybody is already used to using this sandal, and so as a result, we would not listen to him because that his teaching would be contrary to a minhag Yisrael, and on some level minhag Yisrael kedin, and so we would not allow a nevuah to undermine that aspect. On the other hand, we have Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, Amar Rav Kahana, Amar Rav, Im Yavo Eliyahu v'yomer ein choltzin b'minal shomin lo. Now it would be the other way around. If Eliyahu were to come and tell us that you cannot perform a chalitza with a minal, we would listen to him. But ein choltzin b'sandal ein shomin lo. But again, same ending. But if he were to tell us not to use a sandal, then we would not listen to him. Shekvar nahagu ha'am b'sandal, because again, the people have already become accustomed. So my benaya, what's the difference between these two opinions? They were so close. So ika benaya minal lechatchila, that what they're really arguing about is whether or not a minal can be used lechatchila. That according to Rabbah, what does Eliyahu need to tell us in order to allow us to use a minal lechatchila? He would need to tell us that we could use a minal lechatchila, implying that if he didn't say anything, that we could only use a minal b'di'eved. That only if you've already done it would we allow it to be used, but we would not allow you to use it a priori. On the other hand, Rav Yosef, he's the one who says that that Eliyahu would have to come and tell us that you can't use a chalitza. Well, that implies that if he doesn't come, we're going to allow one to use a chalitza lichatchila. And so that's the difference between Rav Yosef and Rabbah. So Rabbah says you cannot use a min al lichatchila, whereas Rav Yosef would allow you to use a min al lichatchila. Well, one second, according to Rav Yosef, we have a good question from our Mishnah, because what did our Mishnah says as we continue in the Gemara, Ulamanda Amra Filu Lichatchila, according to Rav Yosef, who says that it's even Lichatchila a priori that you're allowed to use a minal for chalitza from the start. V'hatanan, what did we say in our Mishnah? Chalza b'minal chalitza sak sheira. If you've already performed chalitza within minal, the chalitza is valid. That implies the avad in that it's okay if you already did it lechatchila, but if you haven't yet done it, lo, you shouldn't do it. So huadin dafilu chatchila. So that seems again. So that's a question on Rav Yosef, but Rav Yosef would answer. You're over analyzing our Mishnah because in fact, the law is that even lechatchila one could use a minal. Well, then why did we use the past tense in our Mishnah? But because of the end of our Mishnah, the latter part of Mishnah, what do we say there? However, if she had already used a sock, a cloth-based foot covering, well then the afilu di'avad, that one is not valid even if you've already done it. So since at the end of our Mishnah, we talk about something that if used in the past, it would not be valid. So as a result, that's why we use that same phraseology for the beginning of the Mishnah, even though in fact a minal would be good lechatchila. So Tananami Reisha diavad. So the phraseology of the beginning of the Mishnah is also using the past tense, which suggests only b'diavad, but in fact, even lechatchila it would be okay. And not only that, so not only do we see that Rav Yosef can read into our Mishnah that min al would be permitted lechatchila, but in fact, umin al lechatchila tanaihi, that in fact there is a debate among Tanaim whether or not a min'al can be used for chalitza lechatchila. Did Tanya? Because we have a brisa. Rabbi Yossi Pamachas halachti l'nitzivin. I once went to Nitzivin. This is what Rabbi Yossi said. Matzati zaken echad. And I happened to encounter an older person. Amarti lo, kluma tabaki Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Are you familiar with Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira? Amarli hene. He said, absolutely. He even eats at my table regularly. So klumra isa shechalatz biyavama. Have you ever seen him do a chalitza? So amarli ra'iti shechalatz harbe pamim. I've seen him do it tons of times. This is unfortunate. It means not a lot of men are dying without children. That's a sad thing. But in any event, the minal of the sandal. So then Rabbi Yossi asked the guy, well, did he use a minal or a sandal? So Amar Li, b'minal. Do we actually use a minal? Right? And then whether we read this parenthetical or not, I think you can go either direction. So Torah Amra Na'alo, lo min'alo. Right? The Torah says his na'al, not his min'al. So as a result, that's why we don't use a minal, according to this fellow reporting how Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira would act. So Amarti lo. So I said to him, Im kain ma ra'a Rabbi Meir lomar chalza b'minal chalitza sa ksheira. But then, if that were true, that it was a biblical line that prohibits us from using a minal, then why would Rabbi Meir say that if you used a minal already, meaning bidi avad, it would be permitted? And you know what else? Rabbi Yaakov Omer Mishmo, and Rabbi Yaakov says in the name of Rabbi Meir, Choltzim b'minal lechatchila, that one can actually use a minal even lechatchila. So we see two views. One is Rabbi Yossi's view of Rabbi Meir, and the second is Rabbi Yaakov's view of Rabbi Meir. And one says minal is permitted b'di avad, and Rabbi Yaakov says no. Rabbi Meir said that minal is permitted even lechatchila. So we see again that we have a Tanaitic debate around the nature of minal, whether it could be done lechatchila or b'diavad. And of course, in this Mishnah, we also saw an opinion that might even say that even lechatchila, even b'diavad, it would not be permitted. Well, in any event, umanda amra lechatchila lo, my taima. What's the reason for the opinion that says that even lechatchila you can't do it? So, ilay mimishum dehavya panta me'al, that if you want to say that it's because you need the min'al, the upper part of the min'al is considered to be on the foot of the yavam, v'arkasa me'al de'me'al. So you have and then the strap. So again, the construction of this is not totally clear to me, but it seems like there's a soft leather immediate covering, and then a harder strap that makes sure that it stays on the foot. So the point is that maybe you need, and the issue is Torah amra me'al v'lo me'al dema'al, and the issue is that when the woman unstraps this min'al shoe, that when they take off the strap, that is not resting directly on the foot of the yavam. It's resting on the soft leather of the top of the shoe, and so as a result, you're not fulfilling the obligation of chalitza, because it says in the Torah, me'al below me'al de'me'al. You have to remove it from on top of the foot, not from on top of something else that's on top of the foot. But if that were the case, if the issue were saying that the min'al doesn't work, well then afilu hachi diavad namilo. So that might help us understand somebody who says that chalitza could not be performed even b'diavad. But according to the one who says that you can do it b'diavad, but it's not good lechatchila, this would not be a good explanation, because according to this explanation, even after the fact, you will have not done what the Torah said. So it can't be based on the language of the Torah. So rather, gzeira mishum minal merupat, that two possibilities. One is that it's the concern is that someone might come to use a torn minal, and Rashi explains merupat. It's about 20-something lines up from the bottom of the Rashi on Kuf Bet Amud Aleph, mivbokeya karua milamala, where the form is ripped from the top, to kaven derachi, but since it's soft, aval gaf de karua meitavle acharye, that even though it's ripped, and so it's, as a result, it's not covering the top of the foot, because it molds to the foot. It's sort of like a sort of a slipper that just covers the toes, so to speak. So it's not, it is enough to keep it on the foot. Imagine like a tight fitting leather footy. So that would be that it doesn't cover the top of the foot any longer because it's been ripped, and so but it stays on the foot. And so the issue is that doesn't cover a majority of the foot, and so as a result, it's not considered a shoe. But that issue doesn't exist with respect to a sandal, Rashi explains, because he continues, Aval sandal shehu kasher. When it comes to a sandal, which is hard, ein yachol liyashvo al raglo mishinafachat, that once it rips, it won't stay on the foot. And so therefore, there's no need to prevent the usage of a sandal. But when it comes to a minal, if it's torn and doesn't cover the foot, that would be a problem. Or again, maybe you have a half minal, meaning it only covers half of the foot. And again, we said that you need something to cover the entire foot. And so that is the explanation of why we would not potentially use a min'al l'chadchila. Of course, those who say that a min'al l'chadchila is okay says we're not going to be concerned about you doing it, because we know the halacha that it says if it's covered more than half, then you're fine. If it's not, then you're not. So we know that only something that covers the majority of the foot is going to be good for chalitza. So Amar Rav. So now we're continuing on in the discussion of what kind of shoe is required. So we have now Rav's teaching, and so Amar Rav, ilav dechamite lechavivi dechalutz besandal deisla shinsin. If I had not seen my uncle, handle a chalitza with respect to a sandal that has straps, I would have only used a sandal that is a taya. The people who go from door to door, door-to-door salesman people, also often used to refer to the people from Arabia. So to mihadatvei, because that is the straps make it tighter on the foot. V'haididan, but our sandal, even though it's got a knot that prevents the sandal from falling off. So the idea here, as I understand it, is imagine a loose set of strings around that keep, a loose set of straps around the foot that keep the sandal on. But then it has, like our sandals it has a latch or a knot that slips into something that prevents the whole thing from unwrapping. And as a result, because it's prevented from unwrapping as a result of the knot ensures that that it doesn't fall off. But the rest of the item is not tight. It's only tight effectively as a result of the knot. The knot just keeps the whole thing from falling off. And Rav thought that maybe we should have a tighter strap all around. So Katrina Bey Midna. But he says that as a result, he still does another strap. So and that way, it's so clear when the woman is unwrapping the shoe that she is intentionally doing a chalitza, because she's going to take off the shoe from the very beginning to the very end, and it's an involved process. It's not just like removing a slipper. Okay, so now we're going to hear three rulings of Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav. We're going to interrupt after the first one to address a side question, but in connection with that, Siman Hataras Yevamot sandal. So those are the mnemonic is a reference to Hataras Yevamot sandal, that the releasing of the Yevamah of the sandal. So let's take a look. So Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, first rule is Hataras. So that's the Hataras of the mnemonic. Hataras Yevamah l'shuk b'shmitas rov ha'akev. That what causes her to be able to go out and marry anybody in the marketplace? It's the removal of most of the heel of the sandal, of the shoe. So Meisvei, I'll ask you a question. What about the following brisa? Hutru ritzuos minal the sandal. If the straps of the minal or the sandal became loosened, Oshishama rov haregel, or the Yavam himself removed most of his foot from the shoe, chalitza sapsula, the chalitza is not valid. Taima deshamadhu. The reason is because he removed most of the foot. Hashamtahi. If she removed most of his foot, chalitza sakshera, then the chalitza would be kosher. So what is the implication? Rov haregel in, rov ha'akev lo. That you need to remove most of the foot from the shoe. It's not enough to remove most of the heel of the shoe. So low. So that is not really a proof against Rav Yehuda in the name of Rab, because Hainu Rova Regel, Hainu Rova Akev. Really, when we say most of the foot, we mean most of the heel. V'amai karule rov haregel, and why is most of the foot used to imply when we mean most of the heel? That the entire pressure of the leg lies on the heel, and so as a result, that's the heel and the foot are really effectively the same thing. And Messiah Rabbi Yanai, and this brisa that we just cited supports Rabbi Yanai. Dama Rabbi Yanai, Vein Shehitir Hu V'Shamtahi. Doesn't make a difference whether he unties and she removes. Ben Shehitira He V'Shamatu, or she unties and he removes. Chalitza Sab Sula Achitatir He V'Sashmiti. She needs to both untie and remove, and only then is it valid. So by Rabbi Yanai, Rabbi Yanai asked the question, and now this is our little aside. Karasu Mahu. What happens if instead she may untie, but instead of removing, she tears the shoe off? Or Srafatsu Mahu, or she burns it off. So Goli Kara Inan, do we need that the foot is just exposed, the ha'ika, and that in fact exists because now the shoe is no longer on the foot? O Dilma Chalitza Inan, or do we need actual formal removal of the shoe, and tearing it off and burning it off don't constitute the ordinary removal of the shoe, the leika, and so therefore we don't have it. Teku. We say that there is not an answer. We do not know the answer to it, and so as a result, we require the regular removal of the shoe, and it's not enough to tear it off. So, Baimine Rabbi Nechemia Merabah. So now Rabbi Nechemia, again continuing with our aside before we get to the next teaching of Rabbi Nechemia of Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav. So Rabbi Nechemia asks, Shnei minalim ze al gav ze mahu. What, so we just dealt with one kind of situation, interesting situation, tearing or burning. What about this other interesting situation where the person's wearing Shnei minalim gazel gav ze mahu? What's the story with two shoes, one on top of the other? Well, now let's take a look and see what precisely is the case. So, Hechi Dami, what are we talking about? If you say that the person removed only the upper shoe and the bottom one remained, you've got to remove it from on top of the foot of the yavam. And this person still is wearing a shoe, the lo me'al de me'al, and not from on top of something that's on top of the foot. And here, the thing that was directly connected to the foot didn't get removed, unlike the case of a minal. So as a result, that will certainly not fulfill the biblical requirement. So that's for sure is not good. So lo tzricha dekrate ilah ushlafte zetatai. That when we're talking about is you tore the upper shoe and now you removed the bottom shoe. So v'ka'ai ilai, and so the upper shoe still remains somewhat on the foot. So chalitza be'inan, do we need a good removal of the shoe that's literally touching the foot, and that v'ha'ika, and we have that. Odilma galuye kara be'inan, or do we need the foot to end up being fully exposed? Vileka, and it's not. And so this is the opposite of the case that Rabbi Yanai talked about. And so the question is, if we have only one of the two things, removal or the bearing of the foot, are we going to be okay? So now the Gemara, he doesn't even answer the question, but asks, is there anybody who does this kind of thing? So yes, there is somebody. This Chaziyua Rabbanan, the Rav Yehuda did nafak b'chamisha zuzei muke l'shuka, that the rabbis once saw Rav Yehuda going out to the marketplace wearing 5 uh, um, uh, 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 5 layers of shoes. So that seems to indicate that yes, people do wear multiple layers. And of course, to some extent, when thinking about the anpilia that we'll talk about in a moment, that that in fact is our socks. We wear 2 pairs of shoes every day, according to this, because we wear, for those of us who wear socks, because we wear socks and shoes. That's 2 levels. So, anyways, so Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. So now we get to the second statement of Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, and we are near the top. We're at the end of the second line on Kuf Bet Amud Bet. We now turn to Kuf Bet Amud Bet. So Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Yevamot shehigdila ben ha'achim. What happens if you have a woman who is a young bride, and unfortunately her husband dies young as well? And so this woman has now grown up in the house of her brothers-in-law. So Yevamot shehigdila ben ha'achim. So she grows up. This Yevamot grows up in the house of her brothers-in-law after her husband has died. So is she allowed to marry one of the brothers through Yibum? Obviously, it's got to be through Yibum, because you can't marry your brother's wife any other way. So so we say that she is allowed to marry, and we're not worried that maybe during the time that she was growing up in that home, she removed the shoe of one of the brothers, which would potentially cause her to have done chalitza. So the implication of this statement is taima delo chazina. We're not sure whether she did it, and so as a result, we'll assume that she did not. But if in fact we did see her remove the shoe, and so she one of them was wearing a boot and needed help getting it off, and she helped him take it off. So, but chashina, we would be worried if we saw that happen, that maybe that was intended to be an act of chalitza. But Bahatanya, we learned in a brisa that says the following: whether he has intention for chalitza and she does not, or she had intention for chalitza and he did not. Chalitza sapsula. That is not a valid chalitza. Both of them have to have the proper intention. So here we see that they both need proper intention. But there, it seems like just watching her, not knowing what her intention is, that would also constitute a chalitza. So 2 answers. Answer number 1, Hachi Kamar. This is what we're saying. Okay. This is what we're saying. Really, aval gaf to chazinan. Really, even if we did see her remove the shoe, ein choshen shema kivnu, we would not be worried that maybe they had the intention for chalitza, because they didn't actually go before the judges and do all the steps that would indicate an intention. And so we'll assume that there was no intention present, and that's how we can understand that, in fact, Rav Yehuda, in the name of Rav, is consistent with the brisa. Alternatively, v'ika da'amri, taima delo chazina. In fact, you're right. The reason that that Rav Yehuda says that the chalitza that the Yevamot is allowed to marry one of the brothers is because we did not see her actually remove the shoes from one of the brothers. But hachazin and choshishin. But if we did see, we would in fact be worried. And so then what second? That seems to be inconsistent with our brisa. And when our brisa says that we need intention, we need kavana, that's in order to allow her to marry somebody outside in the world. But when it comes to causing her to be prohibited to marry one of the brothers, well then, even if she doesn't have intention, we'll be worried that that is a good chalitza. And so we see that there's 2 possible ways of understanding, and they go along with whether or not intention is required in connection with chalitza. And now we go to the third teaching of Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rav. So now we go to the third teaching, and what does he say? Sandal, again, so the first teaching was talking about Hatara, and the second teaching referred to the Yevamot. It began with Yevamot, and now the third teaching begins with Sandal. And so we see that's the mnemonic that we said. Each of those three words refers to the first word of Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav's teaching. So what is it? What is he saying about the sandal? Sandal hataf or pishtan. If you have a sandal that was sewn with linen, ein cholzen bo, you're not allowed to do chalitza. Now, what does that mean to be sewn with linen? So there are two possibilities. So that Rashi offers. Possibility number one is that we're talking about the lining of the shoe, and possibility number two is we're talking about the threads that hold that stitch the shoe together. And so that is that's what we're talking about here. And so as a result, that is going to be ein cholzen bo, that you're not allowed to use that for chalitza. Why? Shenemar ve'enalech tachash. Now this is a pasuk from Yechezkel, and the pasuk from Yechezkel refers to a shoe made of tachash, that Hashem put us in tachash, and so as a result, that's made only from animal hides. So that shows that you cannot use items that in the shoe that were not made from animal hides. The aim of tachash in midi achrina lo. Well, one second, maybe we should go so far as to say that you need to use a tachash shoe, and no other kind of hide can be used to produce the shoe. But no, we don't say that, because now Reba, that when it comes to saying in the Torah, when it talks about the shoe, it repeats the word shoe twice. And so as a result, that indicates that it's an expansive view of shoe. And we're not just going to say that it's got to be a tachash shoe. So even second, now riba, I feel kol mile nami. Well, one second, once you're allowing now the repetition of now to tell us something new, so let it tell us that any kind of shoe, it doesn't have to be made of leather or of hide. So in Cain, tachash maya ahani like. Well, one second. Well, then the pasuk that refers to tachash, that doesn't tell us anything. So that to satisfy that, so now we've got we end up having both concepts. It needs to be out of it. It needs to, tachash tells us it's got to be some kind. An expanded tachash tells us that it's got to be some kind of leather. Okay, so now that we've talked about the proper materials, so Bamine Rabbi Elazar may Rav. So now Rabbi Elazar asks Rav, who trace Yusav shall say mahu? What if the straps are made of leather, and you also have, the shoe is made of leather, but the straps are made out of hair. Is it just from an animal that's sufficient, or is it or do we need it to be truly leather? So Amrlay Milo Kairinan Abe Analech Tachash. Well, if this were made out of tachash, would we call this a tachash shoe? Yes, absolutely, because it would all be tachash. So as a result, that would be here too. It would be sufficient. So ihaki kula shall say nami. Well, one second. If you're going to allow the hair to be used for the straps and the leather to be used for the rest of the shoe, well, why not let the whole thing be made out of the hair? So hahu karka mikre. That would not be called a na'al. It would be called a karka. And so as a result, this is spelled with an aleph, not an ayin. So it's not land. It's karka is the kind of shoe that this would be called. And so as a result, that's why it is not going to be valid, because it's not called a shoe. So Amrlei Rav Kahana l'Shmuel. Rav Kahana said to Shmuel, "Mimai dahai v'chalza na'al me'al raglo mishlafhu. So from the fact that we say that you need to that the chalit chalatza na'alo me'al raglo, how do we know that it means mishlaf? That the chalatza, that when it says the word chalatza, it means removal. Well, the answer to that is dixit, because the pasuk says v'chiltzu es ha'avanim asher bahen hanaga. That when it comes to the concept of tzarat, and the tzarat is in a home, you're supposed to chiltzu es ha'avanim, do something to the stones. Well, what do you do to those stones? You're going to remove them, and so that shows that chalitza means removal. The ema zuruzehu, maybe it means preparing or getting ready. That you should get ready people to go to battle. This is from later on in Dvarim Parak Lamed Aleph Pasuk Gimel. No, no, the point is that you remove them from their homes so that they can prepare to go to war. So one second. There are other references to chalitza that suggest also kind of preparation. That that he's going to support the poor in the poverty. So this seems to suggest that chalitza could be a means of putting on the shoe rather than taking off the shoe. No, the point is that there is a separating here. The point is that God, in reward for his taking care of the ani, or for the suffering of the ani, God will remove the ani from the judgment of Gehenna. So as a result, he will get a better judgment, and so that's the removal that is there. And so you can understand it both as support and as removal. Well, one second, what about the pasuk in Tehillim that says that the angel of Hashem encamps around those who fear God and supports them? That that doesn't seem to be kind of a removal. That seems to be a positive action. So again, again, it is a removal. It's a removal from the laws of from the judgment of Gehenna, and so as a result, that is again not in fact an indication of putting on, but rather an indication of taking off. Well, one second, when it says in Yeshaya that your bones God will strengthen. So Rabbi Lazar, and indeed Rabbi Lazar said about this that this is one of the best brachot that you could have, meaning that those psukim list 11 brachot, and Rabbi Lazar says that the one that strengthens the bones is the most important blessing because it directly affects our bodies. So the Amar Rava Zeruze Garme, that it's talking about strengthening the bones. So that certainly indicates that chalitza means that some sense of providing support. And so if that's true, maybe chalitza means to put on the shoe. So in fact, mashmahachi umashmahachi, the chalitza can be either removal or a sense of strengthening, of preparing something, of getting ready, of supporting something. But if you think that it's some kind of strengthening of then imkain lichtov rachmana bechalza na'alo biraglo, the pasuk should tell us that the chalitza does on his foot or to his foot or in his foot. The point is that not from on his foot. That's what our pasuk says. Well, because of Rachmana biraglo, haba amina biraglo in b'shokolo. Well, one second, that really wouldn't work because we've seen already that the lower part of the leg can also, the covering of a lower part of the leg can also constitute, especially if the person is amputated, that could also constitute a shoe. But if we had biraglo, we would think it would have to be the foot and not or higher up on the leg. So kasav rachmana may al raglo. So maybe that's why the pasuk said may al raglo da afilu b'shoko, that even if she puts the shoe on the leg, not on the bottom of the foot. So in Cain, lichta rachmana b'mei al raglo. No, that should be said. Then if that were, again, if the intention were to put on, it should say in from on the foot, meaning in from something that's above the foot. So my mayal, why does it say mayal without the bet? The point is shma mina mishla, who the idea is that it's talking about removal. So amar lehahu mina. So now that we said that, we're going to quote an exchange that also focuses on this mayal language, or the mem here, and because there's a heretic that was rude to Rabbi Gamliel, and argues that Hashem has actually done chalitza with the Jewish people, and Rabbi Gamliel responds to him, pointing out that the language doesn't work that way. So Amar lehahu mina the Rabbi Gamliel, the heretic said to Rabbi Gamliel, Ama de chalitz le mine, that the Jewish people, your nation, is a nation that the master, namely Hashem, has done chalitza with. Because what does the pasuk say? This is a pasuk in Hosea. Bitzonam uviv karam yilchu levakeshes Hashem below yimtzo chalatz mehem. That when the Jewish people will have their sheep and cattle and they're going to seek God, but they're not going to find God because God has withdrawn from them. So Amar Le, and what is it? Again, the language is chalatz mehem. God has withdrawn from them. So in second, Shota, you're a fool. Miksiv chalatz lahem. Did it say that he did chalitza to them? No, chalatz mehem. He did chalitza from them. So Yevamot the chalsa mina achen midi mishasha ispei. If in fact the Yevamot received the chalitza, meaning either that the brothers took off her shoe, or he or she put on their shoe, that midi de mishasha ispei. Is there going to be any substance to that? Of course not. So the point is that you're misreading the pasuk. It just means to separate, and doesn't mean that God had done chalitza, because the chalitza would need to be done by the wife removing something from the husband. And in this case, God's the husband, we're the wife, and God was taking something from the wife. And so that's not an act of chalitza. Okay, so now we go back to our Mishnah, where we talked about the word anpilia. And so let's take a look and see what the Gemara says about the sock. So Lamemer de anpilia lav minalhu. This implies the fact that the anpilia is not valid for chalitza, even b'diavad. That shows that a sock is not a shoe. Utanan nami, and we have a Mishnah that suggests the same thing. Ein hatorim nichnas lo befargod chafus v'lo ba'anpilia. That when one goes to take truma, one is not allowed to wear either a hem garment or a sock. Ve'ein sarach lomer b'minal v'sandal, and certainly not a minal or a sandal. L'fisha ein nichnasim b'minal v'sandal la'azara, because you're not allowed to go into the courtyard wearing a minal or a sandal. So sandal. So the fact that a sock is not allowed. Why is the sock not allowed? Because this we learned back in Shkalim, that the reason that we don't do this is we're worried that somebody might suspect the person of taking some money out of the treasury. And so as a result, that's why we don't allow them to wear anything that has folds or that where they could store some money. And so, and the only reason that we don't allow the sock is because we're suspicious. The implication being that if we had no worries about suspicion, you would be allowed to wear a sock in the Beit HaMikdash, even though you're not allowed to wear shoes. Uraminu, but one second we have a brisa that suggests otherwise. we have a brisa that suggests that shoes and socks have the same ruling. That when it comes to Yom Kippur, you're not allowed to walk whether you're wearing a minal or a sandal or a sock. So lo mibayas labayas, not from a house to a house. Lo mimita mimita, not from one seat to another seat, not from one bed to another bed. You can't wear it. So in second, that suggests that a sock is a shoe. So Amar Abaye explains, the Isbek say, no, we're talking about a very super duper comfortable sock that in that brisa, and that's why umishum tanug, and it's because of the joy of wearing that sock that you would not be allowed to do it on Yom Kippur. But it's not because it's a leather. It's not because it's considered a shoe. Well, Amarle Rava said to Abaye, that's not a great answer. Mishum tanug below minal v'yom kippurim miyasire. Are we prohibited to because of pleasure? Because of the prohibition of pleasure, to do something not to wear something because it's even if it's not a shoe. That's not true. The Haraba bar Rav Huna karak sudara akarye the nafik. He would wrap a nice kerchief around his foot and that would give him nice comfort, and he would go out. So we see that you're allowed to wear something that's comfortable. It's just about the shoe that's the issue. So as a result, Ella Amarava lo kasha kanba ampil yashal or kanba ampil yashal beged. So the difference is what's the sock made out of? If you're talking about a leather sock, well then that you can't wear on Yom Kippur because you can't wear leather on your feet on Yom Kippur. Kanba ampil yashal beged. Whereas when it comes to a fabric sock, that's what we're talking about with respect to the Beit HaMikdash. That's what we're talking about here. And all of that is not considered a shoe, and that's why you're not allowed to use it either. You are allowed to use it while we're walking in the temple, and you're not allowed to use it for chalitza. So hachinami mistabra de'ilo temahach, and this makes a lot of sense because if you don't say that, kashi yom kippur ayom kippurim ayom kippurim. There's a question because you can find a contradiction between one law about Yom Kippur and another. Because what did we say in another price? It's Tanya, lo yutayel adam kurdekisin betok beito. You're not allowed to walk about in kurdekisin, which is some kind of undershoe. Aval mitayel huba anpilin betok beito. But you can walk about wearing your anpilin, namely your socks in your house. So how do we understand this, which allows you to wear socks, with the other brisa that doesn't allow you to wear socks? So in fact, we see that there are two kinds of socks. There are socks that are made out of leather, which cannot be worn on Yom Kippur, and socks that are made out of other fabrics that can be worn on Yom Kippur. And so tomorrow, stay tuned as we continue this discussion of the definition of a shoe and how we treat the support of an amputee. So God willing, we'll look at that tomorrow, and I wish everyone a good Shabbos.